It's time for me to move away from the game of basketball.
Westbrook stops at the 1 and goes down to a knee.
Bitter labor dispute caused the cancellation of the playoffs.
You don't know when he's going to be back. 2 really serious concussions.
Hello, welcome back to How To Fantasy Sports. In today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look back at week 1 of the NFL season, and specifically what we can do to help better position our team now that we're actually seeing them play and seeing how they're performing on field. At the beginning of the year, we make these strategies and guidelines as well as our rankings on how we think players are going to perform, but now's our chance to actually see how they're being used in their team's offenses, and so we can really make some better judgments about who are going to be the strong fantasy plays this year. And so when we look back at these rankings, and when you look back at yours, always keep in mind that this is one game, and we don't really know specifically what was it that contributed to either the success or failures of these players in those games. Was it just a poor offensive strategy? Are the teams really that offensively challenged? Are the players not being used as much as we thought they were going to be used in their team's offenses? Or were they just playing against a strong defense? Or conversely, were they playing against a terrible defense? There's a reason why we have a term that players are in mid-season form, and that's because they will improve over the season. And so where they are right now isn't necessarily where they'll be at the midpoint or even the end of the season. And so to begin our look back, we're going to take a look at the quarterback position first. And there wasn't too much in the way that the quarterbacks played that we saw that would really change our rankings from the beginning of the year, or what was our strategy or approach to drafting quarterbacks this year. We thought the play of the quarterbacks was pretty consistent to what we kind of imagined that they'd play. Maybe some didn't do as well as we thought they would, or some performed even better than we thought they would. But we think over the long season, the way that we had ranked or the way that we imagined these quarterbacks finishing up, we think that it'll hold up over the long haul. Except for 2 noticeable exceptions, one being Robert Griffin III. He had a fantastic game. He was probably going to be the top point-getting quarterback in your league, depending on the settings that you have in your league. So it's hard to argue against the guy, except he is still a rookie. And there is history to rookies starting strong, but then as defensive coordinators are able to game plan for them specifically, find ways to minimize their impact and influence on the game. Plus, he has also lost Pierre Garcon, his number 1 wide receiver, probably to turf toe, which we've seen in the past is a real lingering injury that can affect the quality of his play over the entire season. So, while we think Robert Griffin III is probably worthy of a quarterback 1 role in 10-team leagues, he isn't as high as being able to say that he's going to finish in top 5 or something like that. We think he will continue probably his hot streak now, but taper off a little bit in the back end of the season, and that's really where you need him the most. So keep riding his hot hand now, but prepare to switch to maybe someone else a little bit later on in the season. And the other quarterback is Mark Sanchez. Obviously, we weren't ranking him in our videos because we weren't so clear on how he was going to be used and how Tim Tebow was going to be used in the offense. But now, after one game, we see that Mark Sanchez really isn't going to have to be all that concerned about Tim Tebow vulturing either short yardage plays away from him or even coming in and running a little bit of the offense from time to time. So because of that, we think he does qualify as a quarterback, your second quarterback, or if you're playing in a deeper league, he's maybe around your 15th ranked quarterback. Obviously, he had a great game against Buffalo, although it looks like maybe everyone might have a good game against Buffalo moving forward. So temper your expectations coming off of his one good game. So then moving on to the quarterbacks. We hope that you followed our advice to stay away from Carolina running backs and Washington running backs in general. And that advice continues on to this day. In fact, we'd actually add Pittsburgh and Atlanta running backs to that group. We think the situation with these running backs is just very muddled without any real clear direction on who is going to be leading in touches from game to game. Especially even in Washington, everyone's very excited about this Alfred Morris running back after he had a great game. In terms of fantasy points, he actually only averaged around 3 yards per carry, and he was getting a lot of carries because the team was up a lot. So in the moving forward, knowing Shanahan's preference for not necessarily riding the best hand, but riding the running back who he feels like is going to give him the best option in each game, I think it's very hard to forecast great things for Alfred Morris any better than we can forecast them for Halu and Royster. So, again, try to avoid these running backs as best you can. If you've got them, try to trade them when you think their value's high. But until some of the running backs on those teams start getting injured and you've got one clear guy standing, it's just not really worth investing in these running backs who could end up giving you some low returns on week 2 and beyond. Following them, Maurice Jones-Drew, Adrian Peterson, Matt Forte, they all turned in great week 1 performances, especially considering there's a lot of questions about the roles that how they were going to be used in their team's offenses. Looks like all those question marks are completely gone. Even Matt Forte, he might not be the goal line back, but as we said before, we weren't really concerned about that at all. He's still one of the most dynamic running backs in the NFL these days and is going to score regardless of whether or not he's getting his goal line touches. Backs that we're not that excited about coming out of this weekend. Chris Johnson, wow, he threw up a bad game. If you've got him, you got to keep starting him, but if you can get a trade for him, maybe you might want to consider that. But we're not so sure that New England's defensive line is that strong to hold Chris Johnson back. We think the troubles that he had last year with running the ball, they're back and they might be here to stay. And Peyton Hillis wasn't really getting he wasn't drafted that highly, but wow. You were drafting him as the goal line back, and it doesn't look like he's even going to be the goal line back in Kansas City anymore. So get him out of your starting lineup, and if you don't see him being used in week 2 or week 3 in that goal line role, it's safe to drop him. And in a good buy low opportunity, take a look at Steven Jackson, who didn't really return a lot of fantasy points, but was used quite heavily in that St. Louis Rams offense. And really, he is that offense. So while he might from time to time throw up a game like he did in week 1, he's still going to be used extensively. He's still going to be asked to provide a lot of the offense for St. Louis. So if you can trade low for him right now, definitely is an excellent option to get. And so next up is the wide receiver position. And we always love the wide receiver position coming out of week 1 because there's always a group of wide receivers that perform exceedingly well for no real reason other than during the course of the season, wide receivers have breakout games. And it just so happens that they have their breakout game in week 1. And week 1 ends up being their best fantasy game of the year, and everyone misses it, but everyone goes crazy adding them to their team, expecting this breakout to continue during the course of the year when really it doesn't happen. And so they end up wasting a roster spot on these players when they could be better spent using these roster spots for someone else. And this year looks no different for our perspective, that players like, say, Stephen Hill from the Jets, Kevin Ogletree from Dallas, they turned in great week 1 performances, very hard to duplicate performances, and really when you consider their role on their team and what the option they are in their team's offenses, probably are going to be hard pressed to return that value again. If you're using these players, you're looking them as a sort of back end top 30, top 40 player at the wide receiver position at best. So if you're taking on these players, only expect to get that type of value from them. Whereas the players that we really liked, who we think are deserving of a little bit higher ranking in our preseason rankings for wide receivers, are Danny Amendola from St. Louis, Laurent Robinson from the Jacksonville Jaguars, Lance Moore, and even Reggie Wayne. These guys got a lot of targets in their team's offenses, and they're demonstrating that they are the number one receiving option on their team right now. And as long as they're getting those targets, they're getting the opportunity to perform for your team. Now, aside from maybe Reggie Wayne, you're probably only drafting these guys as your third wide receiver. Again, maybe like a back-end top 30 level play, but a lot of people aren't talking about these guys, so you can get them quite cheaply if you have to expend waiver dollars on them, or you can even just pick them up as straight free agents, and they're probably going to return the same amount of value over the remaining games of the season as, say, someone like Kevin Ogletree or Stephen Hill. And so our final look is at the tight end position, and we thought the tight end position performed incredibly well in week 1. There was a lot of tight ends that came away with some really good fantasy lines. And so we don't have really anything in the fantasy position that we would, in the tight end position that we would say would make us change our rankings all that much. Although we probably would like to highlight that Coby Fleener, he got 10 targets in that Indianapolis offense, an offense that's going to be playing from behind a lot, and so they'll be throwing the ball a lot. And he looks like he is the number 2 option in that Indianapolis offense. So if you can get your tight end as being the number 2 option in any team's offense, well, that's a player that's probably going to return a lot of points over the course of the season. He has a real good chance of finishing within the top 10 or at least the top 15 of the tight ends this year. And so that concludes our look at week 1 of the fantasy football season and how it affects our rankings of players moving forward. Overall, there wasn't too much that we saw that from week 1 that would make us change our rankings all that much. And hopefully it's the same with you. Definitely don't do anything knee-jerk reactions. If a player didn't do as well as you thought they would, still keep them in their lineup for at least one more game. And if they don't perform as well coming out of that second game, then it might be time to find a strategy to move on from them. We hope you enjoyed this video. We hope that you found some information in this video useful that you can use to improve your fantasy team. If you have any questions, send us an email at question@howtofantasysports.com. Otherwise, subscribe to this channel to stay informed on our future videos. All our best in week 2 of the fantasy football season. Take care. Bye.